Hello. It is podcast number 2. Not the origin, not the trailer, not the first time going around, but the second. And here, we'll delve a bit into a heavier theme at the start, so bear in mind it will get a little mucky for a bit, but it is for good explanation, both in some explanations on the podcast and lore or vocabulary, that kind of thing. But hello, it's your host, SelphyClark, with XP for Heal. And today, with the XP that we may achieve, the XP we might stumble upon, and even just the conversation to be had, we'll deal with both a contemplation of my life, the podcast, love, romance a bit, but in the more digital fashion. We may talk about real life romance as well, or maybe I should just bleed a few topics here and there into this, since my journey, my experience, my impression of love and romance did have a heavy influence in the digital realm of games and stories and fiction and a plethora of just foreign-based concepts and cultures compared to the Western ideals. Those came later into my life, which would be interesting to talk about too, but just so you have a little heads up of, hey, this is how we will begin a different style of podcasting, and I hope you enjoy today. So, for XP for Heal, and we will dive into whatever we're healing from. So, we should probably address this a lot sooner than I anticipated, but why am I going around saying post-Demon King era? For one, saying that it's post when horrific shit is still continuously ongoing and being mostly unburied, or even trying to be unburied at this point. It's just to explicitly get that out in the open. We're nowhere near a true post-darkness, but through the life experience that I've overcome and have centered myself on, or I've found balance in, this really does feel like a post-epic battle. The end to a exhilarating fight. The finale to the third stage to a big boss battle fight. I truly do see I have pulled, crawled, dragged, scraped myself out of the most terrifying muck that nearly drowned me into non-existence. So, while I have to acknowledge it's not truly a post completion for most or any, but in the sense that I'm able to freely conversate and live happy or successfully, or even just without this clawing chain and ball to me. If anything, in the grand scheme of anything, this may have just been accomplishing a very difficult PlayStation 1 battle fight, a mini-boss that arrives just before the true final boss, or even this is the first stage of the true final fight, but like the games that surprise you with a whole new mechanic at the ending, where they suddenly provide you with a rhythm game instead of hack and slash and fighting. But I have managed something in this isekai that I've managed to stumble into in my early 20s, and now I've accomplished such feats that people really shouldn't experience such darkness, but I've come out and I've felt the warmth of sun and love and support and normalcy in my life that gives me the feeling that I am a champion against a demon king, that may have not slain the demon king, but I have imprisoned it, I have ensnared it, I have sealed it in such a way that my life onward is secure, that I can breathe lightly and I can give my strength to another to continue on this battle to truly defeat the evil that lurked for so long in the background. Maybe it's in a way I feel like in due time I will become that elderly sage that passes on my last ounce of energy, my last bit of power onto someone to truly succeed. Because, I mean, sure, I could think I'm the main protagonist. I could think I am truly the air that breathes into everyone's life, but no, I don't have to be the main protagonist in the full story. I could be someone who's figured out my shit. If anything, I have my hope again. I have my warmth. My story now moves from just a bloodbath revenge isekai to now a slice of life. And that is such a beautiful transition from the everyday panic and terror and constant overstimulation to now I can sit back and listen to the cicadas chirping in summer. I can bask in the wonder of the world, and I can provide my knowledge for someone else to become their own main character as well. And that is such a grand thing to have in all the chaos that happens day to day. This is truly a blessing that the darkness that I could have lived, I could condense it all in one small portion of my life, and now the rest of it is free for me to enjoy the very existence of being here. And that is why I think I am in my post-Demon King era. I am the knight who, by any means, took care of the demon that was haunting me, that was plaguing whatever situation was happening. And I'm able to move on with my life past this epic story into whatever I make of it. The blank pages are endless for me. And I love that. This is part of the healing, the revelation that every day I wake up not in terror but in wonder. And that gives me more XP every day that I figure out I want to exist, I am happy, and I am given the support and wonder to continue. And many different stories have talked about demon kings, the end of an epic journey. So it's confusing to think, should I be sad? Should I be exalted? Should I be relieved? Should I be confused or scared, but now is opportunities and wonder and possibilities. And each day I'm able to give my all in passion and happiness, in supporting everyone else in their journeys. I can give my voice to them. I can uplift them. I don't have to worry about overexerting myself because I don't have these stresses now, and I can give my all for everyone else. My strength has now doubled with this essential retirement in the epic adventure sense. But I can still have wild, grand journeys and expeditions, but they just won't hold that sense of fear. But they feel joyous to continue forth. And that goes into that main topic, but sure, we have Demon Kings talked about in anime as reverse isekais, goofy ones, breaking up the stereotypical model, or even taking them down a peg of their power. But my Demon King era is essentially a blend between a dark series called Redo Healer. Now, petty revenge or violence, sure, is not my goal or my intention, but the fact of I get to do my life again, and I have the knowledge to move forward, but not to do evil, but to save both myself and the world around me, the people I love most. So yes, it does take the very small essence from that series that has a lot of problems to it, but it started the thought process, at least. And I can't fault it for having its dark story when sometimes evilness is defeated with evilness, but every situation has its different necessary steps to success. But again, each solution has many steps to completing it. You don't have to go about it black or white. You don't have to go right and wrong. You have to figure out what you can live with. What can you sleep with at night? What you can tell other people and understand that they won't judge you for this. Or if you rise above it all, whatever makes your heart whole again. To some that may sound dark, but for some of the horrors that have happened in the world, the Demon King inside of you, around you, must be taken down, must be sealed, must find a way to become your knight, to become the hero of your own soul and mind. And I do hope anyone who listens to this that you do find in yourself your own hero to rescue you and to guide you into the light, into the post-Demon King era of your own. I applaud you in any way, and I hope with this you've gained the XP to brave into the new light, the new world, the new universe and we can guide each other into something beautiful. God, there is still things to absolutely be breath taken away by in this world. And there's still a lot to fight for. But I understand there's a lot to make you tired. Others can stand up and be their hero. So I hope more will stand against the fight and brave it. It's nice to express all that. Maybe it gets aggressive, or maybe it feels a bit too personal, but I feel that's a good way to express why I use the term post-Demon King era in conversating about how I'm healing and how XP has been given to me, and I feel that my self has leveled up in ways that I never imagined as a high school student, a middle school student, and now someone post-college, and now entering into grad school. It's just wild how things have changed, but I can still see things from my past that have fond memories still. Now, I'd like to contemplate. We got a little heavy at the start with my confessions and my demands and my expressive details on why I wanted to label my journey as such, but everyone's journey is different. Everyone's experience is wholly something I may never be able to fully comprehend, but I can be compassionate and empathetic for. And I've been off track for a while for a lot of my goals I wanted to achieve, but that's okay. I'm still figuring it out, and I have a lot of time to accomplish it. And I still have a chance to continue this story. I have chances every second to exist and to build upon it. Because again, I have not explained the true depths of darkness my life felt. But the easiest and colorfulest way I can put it is Demon King, because fighting games and anime have depicted this as something as the highest level of epic journey to accomplish. And it resonates with me. And I'm happy I've had video games to have that experience with. I mean, sure, how I talked about fear in the video games was a bit scattered or not quite detailed in the way that could have been more researched, but it's my own experience. And every day it will develop, it will change. And the next step in all this is to continue with my schooling, continue with the content. I want to continue with streaming. I want to continue with making videos and editing. I love it. It's such a fun, happy little nugget that I can take up some time on the side compared to just studying and talking and learning about the mind. So we'll figure out how we want to proceed with the story, since if we're going to have a 2-hour session on this podcast, we can't have 2 hours of heavy. 20 minutes to 30 minutes sounds like a good dump of everything. And then we can express everything else that's a bit lighter and cerebral to wonder about in the story of healing and video games. So, give us some things to wonder about. From the heaviness of my own experience and how I'm figuring out how to categorize it with Demon King era. To that, I have found with video games, so I mean, we talked about the first episode, obviously, the prime game mechanic that is used heavily in most games. Fear. In the fact of we use it in competitions, we use it against rivalry. I can never say that word correctly. The fear in a lot of horror games, or fear of the futuristic fiction fantasy worlds that can be created, to the simple mechanics games can do to elicit fear, like choice-based adventures or jump scares, odd collectible items or lore you can stumble upon. But pushing that aside, dating games, love, romance, visual novels, otomes, shoujo, girls type game, all these things that encompass both the stereotype and the actual tree of where these games have developed out to, where they've started, how they've transformed over the years. So, I mean, I myself personally have been a heavy consumer and avid fan of Tokimeki Memorial, Girl Side, and the original Tokimeki Memorial, which is a stat raiser of the dating sim games. So it's not wholly just talking to these digital beings, but you have to meet certain criteria in order to gain their affection, gain their story, or be acknowledged by senpai, if we're going to be stereotypical in some of these past games, and their interesting choices of both pursuable, romanceable characters and how corny they could be with the stories. I mean, things have changed and not changed at the same time. Going into it, since we talked about dating sims, stat raisers, it's not the only thing that's considered an otome, because it's a different gameplay style the game can have, where it can move the story along at different paces or challenge people to compete for certain different endings, or different types of characters can be unlocked based upon parameters compared to a standard visual novel or standard otome type game where you follow along the main plot and you're entered into a sub-route where it has a romanceable path you'll follow, where, depending on your choices or collecting of items or battle, or just understanding what type of character you're working with, it will change the ending, dead end you, or even glitch out the game. Because if you have been an avid fan of Harvest Moon or Story of Season, you know tragedy struck in Tree of Tranquility, where Calvin forever had to be romanced by other Phoebe. But if you had a good copy of the game and you were privy to this knowledge, you were able to continue that romance. Which is kind of funny that was just an odd glitch that happened, but my god, if you have time, you can find a really creepy fanfiction that delves into the glitch as if it's truly a bad ending to the game. Like, literally, the details that fanfiction, if I can find it, oh my god, it was great. It felt legit, like canon material for that glitched out copy of the Wii, which I never learned if I did have the broken copy or not, because I was just petrified to lose hundreds of hours of farming and materials and all the story I've gone through. Like, those aren't part of my childhood. They are core memories to me. So, let me check back on what is that title. Aha, we have discovered what it is. And lovely how it's titled. A glitch in the system. It's rated M, it is a horror. It has our lovely farming protagonist Angela, or Akari, and Calvin. It got published back in 2011, and honestly, it's just a good short story horror that unnerves you from such a sweet little story of romance and how far it twists the simple romantic cutscene into this elaborate dark story. Well, I totally got off track with that. I mean, just mention a glitch and I want to talk about Harvest Moon indefinitely. But I mean, it's a big part of my own experience with romance, dating games, wooing, courtship in video games in the digital world. Because the whole aspect of visual novels, any Eastern type game did not come into my lap or my accessibility, or English, my access, the accessibility I did not have freely and safely to use until, when was it? Oh goodness, because now trying to track back my brain, because I mean, of course, played Saya no Yuta, but that's in its own case. It can't just be a dating game because it's freaking a psychological eldritch horror as well. But we have, obviously, something that I talked about more recently in my other social medias, Azul X Twilight, and their games of Fantasia, the grand finale, and the Realm of Thanos. For what I can talk about specifically on those games, because I replayed those games quite a bit for the Fantasia series, since you have multiple different characters you can pursue. There's a lot of lore in the background as well. Plus, the games stack on top of each other for the world building. Sure, you can play them separately, but a cake layer of information that trickles in the background, or understanding different characters' reason for doing something or how they're connected comes up as you play it more and more, which, for being just a hopeless romantic and wanting to see fantasy, romance, epic adventures, it was a good way to explore that. Plus, seeing a young artist create this game and seeing them build it up and seeing their progress when they were talking about it on the actual game development lemma soft forms, which was exciting. I mean, it's the whole fact of, like, when you get to live stream on Twitch, you get to see someone in person talking about their process bit by bit. But again, something else we can talk about later. But Fantasia, the whole premise of the game, some of the jokes and stuff are a little aged, but again, it was a different time creating the game, and it still holds up pretty damn well for being a game that excited me enough to actually put the time and effort to code a game. So it has some merit. And even if you play through the first, play through the second, and now in this year of 2023, seeing the trilogy come to an end, to a finish, to a close, with the grand finale, which originally was going to be an entirely different game they worked on. At this point, it did say it was in hiatus, so maybe is that something that could come back in due time? But the entire game scrapped for the demo that they did that had a whole battle system. And the whole new game came out of it, not just a few years, like several, like more than 5 years. And here it is now. So it's bittersweet, nostalgic remembrance, and a sigh of relief, and even just a bravo. The final performance is here. I haven't played the final game yet because I don't want it to be over quite yet, so definitely when I play it, I will be a fanatic. But back to actually what the even heck is Fantasia, because not everyone has played it. It is isekai, fantasy, sometimes it plays at the joke of Mary Sue, or the pick-me girl, but still. You play as YN, or canonically using the name Cheryl in the game. You are transported to a new world where the balance is hanging between darkness and light. This new planet called Fantasia and the realm of Thanos. And obviously you being the protagonist, you have pretty much no ties to your world, so you can just leave and come here. And essentially, you have an option of romancing 4 different male characters, so it doesn't have any other genders or non-binary, but still, it sets up a game that allows you to explore through about 6-7 days worth of little dialogue between each character, and you start to see each have darkness or sadness about them, which can be reflected back to the main protagonist being an orphan and a lonely girl who came to this world to save it because she wanted to understand if someone else could feel and hear and understand her pain, which is something you see if you go through the canonical route, because that's another beautiful thing about dating games and simulations. The creators have an option to make any of the paths canonical, true, or subplots at any times. Different characters hold different weight to the narrative, or you get to just dive deeper into a character's profile and see where it leads you in the story, because especially if you love to play these games without the walkthrough, it's nice to see when you're given choices and they actually lead you to good endings. It's a nice reward in itself that you felt you could either roleplay as this character or your own thoughts and feelings were able to guide the narrative in that positive ending. But of course, there is a reason to play with a walkthrough, because you don't want to see a bad ending. You don't want to waste 5 hours of your time clicking and reading, and then suddenly, bam, you didn't save, and now you have to backtrack to a random choice you made that was a plus or minus, or when you failed to pick up an item in a merchant shop. So there's no shame in doing walkthrough, but it's a nice delight when you don't have to struggle with a whole mathematical formula to woo your character. Besides derailing the conversation a bit, but still, it is something that needs to be talked about, so let me put a pin on this about the walkthroughs, the endings, the canonical routes. But Fantasia, obviously, it's a game that has been in the works for a long time. It's something that I got to see be developed, be created, and seeing the first game come out and getting to play through every different ending possible, and then realizing the game story, the lore, continued into a second full-scale game that the creator made. And it had much more added to it because the list of romanceable characters, the whole world building, expanded tremendously. Now, I haven't played the third game because technically I've played the demo that came out for what was used to be the third game. But there's an official release for Grand Finale that you can find on many of the different websites, and I really hope I enjoy how I can pair up characters and what will be the conclusion to the story. And I hope to see the creator, Azul X Twilight, continue making games, finding ways to weave an elaborate fantasy story or sci-fi or episodic. Who knows? It's a world of their own creation. But to move from Fantasia, because, I mean, honestly, if we wanted to really break it down, we could talk about it for quite a bit longer, but I could probably do that another time, so let's give some other games a chance to be dissected and discussed and pondered on. Because from those games, definitely, here we go. The good old web games from like Newgrounds and for, what was it? Flash, Adobe Flash. Especially people who use that, be prepared to be amazed. Okay, just to be a little bit more specific, because if you were a avid surfer, browser, content peruser of DeviantArt, not the degent side of DeviantArt, but the web flash games that you could have on there, because if you know about Pack Thesis or Pactaba, Kami or God, because this person had created how many different games? My gosh, like back in 2010. 2010 was this giant era of just a dump of games that they created. Idle Days, Another Day Sim games. There was a Alice in Wonderland. There was an Anime Sim Date. There was Chrono Date, Another Days, Exol and Mr. Toku's Adventures, Lunar Days. What else? My gosh, there were so many little Flash comics that they did. Gary Stu, if you know about that. Rainbow Days as well. Star Days, which I don't know if Star Days ever finished. I mean, we might as well go back. Let's see. Can I find the games? Because, I mean, the main website you can't find them on, so let's scroll about. Oh, good old Congregate. Yes, you still have these games. Oh, I should definitely play these on Twitch. These were, oh, what a wonder of anime-esque dating adventures that you had choice-based adventures with these goofy characters. And yeah, that was definitely one way I was able to play games freely, because since I couldn't just buy a console and play them, this way I was able to peruse the web for different art. Now, not all the web flash games were age appropriate, so let me just say I was one of those deviant kids who clicked yes I was of age of something when I was not. Okay, just to preface, I was perusing the web a little unhinged, but I was safe. I only got my computer with a virus twice, but I was able to clean it up in the same day, so I made a mistake and I got it fixed. Good job on me. Now, the games I'm talking about is for a very specific niche era of 2012, 2010, where you were able to have a dating game that was pretty much you could sit down and finish it before you had to go to dinner. You didn't have a 10-hour span, unless, of course, you were hunting for Easter eggs or whatnot. And it was delightful because you still got quite a bit of characteristics, quite a lot of development, and you felt as a 13-year-old-esque, middle school-esque kid that, hey, this is sweet romance, even though it was like literally falling in love in like 2 days, so not healthy. So in like 2 days, so not healthy. So that's the web flash ones that are the main ones that I played. Sure, there's a few other ones that came up. I remember there was quite a few of the premises were very short adventure games where you would buy a lot of gifts for the people rather than talk to them and help them solve their problems. That kind of interaction in dating games did not happen for me. I mean, some of that does happen in Tokimeki, but still, it's basically a game that relies upon your parameters to accomplish the main goal of dating and succeeding at your high school experience. I mean, there's Love Revel. That one has both love and hate for it because, first and foremost, because it's literally the full official title being reminiscent of Ugly Duckling, Revolution, Transformation, and its common titles just being Love Revel, so that already will set someone off to a uncomfortable time if they have body dysmorphia. Given there is a title change for both the English release and the Japanese release, and plus language difference you have to acknowledge, because if you've seen the manga adaptation, it calls it Ugly Duckling, and the cover art is very heavily implied that she's a very rounded face, almost dopey, not very altogether kind of looking character, and then they always silhouette or shadow her quote-unquote perfect form, so that's really frustrating when you see both the Japanese title saying more of a maiden or girl's revolution, like becoming from a girl to a woman, but then that's in a whole other debate topic too, so we just can't win. And then the very fact of then some of your love interests in the game are a teacher, someone who's, a second year, so a sophomore technically, and that there is the kind of hidden, kind of out of the way route of Brocon, because, warning, incest. There's a brother route, which has stayed in both the DS game and the PlayStation game, surprise, surprise, even though that's not even the main thing they talk about, because guess what? When you have the title of the game, the brother's not even on the front cover. So they kind of get away with it by making it something you have to search for. Plus, you have to go through the game twice to even discover that route. So maybe that's how they have a workaround. And the game, it came out, it came on the DS era, so it's been a bit. Now, it is a fun gameplay game, like trying to balance both high school parameters like Tokimeki, plus you have to worry about doing these diet and exercise things to keep up with every week. Plus, you have to deal with the whole romantic dating scenario, which in 1 year can go by very quickly. So if you want a challenge for your game, sure, it's going to have some kooky adventures, but take it with a grain of salt that they were playing with some both dark topics and towing the line on what was appropriate to talk about in a romantic game. Still, the game is available and there is an English patch if you do want to try it. Because again, it is a piece of fiction, so it's not reality. And both the artists who did lovely CGs for the game has done incredible other work that maybe is a bit more raunchy, but it is up for you to decide. I mean, since we're talking about the DS era, let's go to my most favorite and most prized DS game collection that both jumps back to fear in video games and love in dating sims. I'll wait for you at the edge of darkness. Kuraima no hate de kimi o matsu. Now, this game is only available as a original DS game. It is labeled as CRLB, so there is death, there's murder, there is romance, but there's nothing ecchi, there's nothing too violent that you see on screen. It's more of the implications that happen, because literally, you have the cover, it's a very Bishonen-esque story cover, and a lot of elements of blue and darkness and the moon. Because quite literally, the entire game happens in one single night. So it's drawn out this story that, if you know how to play it, I think it's 10 hours or less for one route alone. If you have some problems with some puzzles, or if you're trying to gain all the endings for one person, might take a little bit longer, give or take, just depends on your reading speed. But both a game that actually dipped its toes into thriller, horror, and a huge time-based game, plus so many eligible bachelors to pick from. Only there's a catch this time. One of the pursuable characters that are trying to help you survive the night before an explosion happens, one of them's actually the killer who brought everyone trapped inside the school. And yes, I do speak about this cryptically. I'm not trying to give away some elements of the story, so if you're a little confused on what I just said, give the game a go, or watch one of my playthroughs of the game, because it is hella exciting game, because they put so much time and effort into the ambiance. The OST gives you terror, it makes you feel like your heart is racing. And then the game has voice acting for the characters, but I know, most importantly, the protagonist actually has a personality, and she has a very interesting route if you discover who the killer is and still pursue them. Oh, it is quite the doozy of a plot if you go down that way. Ho ho ho. But I won't give away too much more. Besides, the game does give you that very basic psychological trick of being in scary situations develop romantic feelings. Now, in each route you do open up about some vulnerable things, because everyone's dark side, everyone's secrets are pretty much laid out on the table, so you get close to them very quickly. Now, it's not the only type of game that deals with horror or a time-based element to it. In a technical way, the letter that is available through Steam, I think Humble Ground or Ichito, I think it's been implemented on Switch now, but Essentially, this game called The Letter, where chainmail, quite literally in a physical form, starts to haunt a group of friends. And most of them truly don't even believe in this otherworldly spirit that's coming to kill people with its vengeance. It does have an element of dating and romance in it, but it's mostly a game where your choices, your consequences, lead to different types of ending. It does have a canonical ending, which some people don't like, but they decided to go that route. Sweet? Sweet Trap? Sweet Love? What is it? Because there's another one that's in an amusement park that deals with that kind of same premise. What was it? Sweet Fuse, that's what it is. I haven't gone to play that yet because couldn't find a physical copy of it. That's one that I need to start. But I mean, it deals with you being trapped in a location with a threat of death, and you have romance. I mean, I know it had a bit more controversy since the age range of some of the romanceables, but it's very cutesy, still very sweet-like compared to I'll Wait for You at the Edge of Darkness, where it's all at night, very heavy, and a lot of mystery because you don't know who's who. All the people you meet in the game, you're pretty much meeting for the first time, with only one person being a childhood best friend, but even that person starts to look like a suspect as well. It's crazy. Because for one, that's good writing, that it makes everyone appear like a suspect and can reintroduce that doubt at different points in the game. So bravo. What else? I'm trying to think, because horror-type dating sims aren't heavily out there. I mean, we have another one, but it is strictly an 18-plus game. It is not for minors in any shape, way, or form. So with me talking about this next game, please take the discretion to understand I am speaking to those who are legally, mentally mature of the legal age who can play this, okay? So buckle down. The Price of Flesh. Boyfriend to Death 1 and 2. And Till Death Do We Part. These few games are a niche set of erotic horror death games. They are not like the rest of them where they were published on like DS games. This other set of games are only online, and even the creator has to heavily remind people that it is triggering and it can be harmful if put in the wrong hands. So I take this time now to reiterate that point of do not search for this if you are not of the age and if you could become triggered. Understand that, okay? I know I stumbled upon this game with no recommendation being given to me, but more so me looking to find more games that pushed boundaries on content and what the creator or the artist or the writer was delving into, what is possible both in the UI and gameplay style, but even besides the lighthearted, sweet side of games where you could find love, save the day, have a cooking channel, or have a dog, or go to space or something. But like some high-end, like Nitro Plus games where they use these edgy, gritty topics and ideas that will pull you into a bone-chilling experience. And to preface as well, I played these games before I had any traumatic instances in my life, so I didn't have any reason to use this as like a coping mechanism for me, but more so trying to find out what truly scared me or to test where my limits were. And as well, I truly got a thrill and a wonder about how someone else can intricately design or create or think about something that could scare you in ways that are not monsters, but things that happen in the daylight, essentially. Now, from what I can remember, I know I found the games through their official website, which, I mean, if you've seen the website, it's pretty on the nose that it is not kid-friendly, okay? And I was intrigued. I mean, it looked put together. It looked like a well-designed game. And so, we delved into the first of the Boyfriend of Death games, which a lot of the horror was written rather than seen. It was more of the imagination plays with you more, which, I mean, it does have some truly creepy implications depending on if you have any phobias, but it was exciting because besides it being a game itself, there was this entire background lore and world building and interconnected relationships between different characters that I really wanted to know more about. Like, the game pretty much set it up where this could become a full-blown comic or TV show where they would expand upon the world. And I mean, there's a full-blown comic that the creator makes for an entirely separate story, but still, it's fascinating to see the creativity put into this. And more so in the years, more people have come out with similar type games. Games that deal with stalkers, deal with the surprise twist, the lighthearted story that unveils a twisted truth, or the drama CD series of like Yandere Heaven. That's definitely influenced quite a bit of this with some games that have been fan-base designed. Yeah. And from playing through the first game and getting to the second, you saw quite the leaps and bounds for design-wise, and even the amount of different endings, different choices you could make that opened up the window of possibilities. Which mean, when you play a choice-based game, and especially when it's timed or you're designed to be scared, it becomes a bit addicting to try again. Especially because the game, a lot of the times, would remember or understand you're playing this game several times over, so it felt like you were being recognized as well. And I do wonder if they will ever make, I mean, technically, Price of Flesh is like a trilogy. I mean, it's technically like a third one, but it is designed in a different fashion compared to the other games. I loved it because, besides the game being created and developed, we then received a very, very surprising DLC after the game's release. And it added such a tidbit of lore to some of the other characters that had been previously talked about in past games that it's like finishing up a novel and all of your questions finally being answered. It was thrilling. And again, not spoiling, and I'm not trying to hash out too much information, because really, if you can legally play the game, I really like you to play it, enjoy the content, and see how you survive, essentially. From going from the Japanese, the controversial dating games that have wacky twists and plots, to the edgy, dark, thrilling games that are limited, but then there's the webcomic games, the flash games. Oh my goodness, I mean, of course we've got to talk about Harvest Moon. I mean, quite literally, I have it tattooed on my arm. Not the word Harvest Moon, but if you've ever seen in the previous Story of Season games or Harvest Moon, there's a blue feather that is presented to your romantic interests as a proposal item. And I quite literally got that tattooed on my arm. And this past year, I have the colored hearts that would signify each time you would develop your friendship or your romantic level or your courtship with them. And I cherish it. It's beautiful, it's wonderful. I mean, I do like it that they did the flower blossoming icons for the Trio of Towns Story of Season. Because technically they had the 2 Village Valley one, but then they decided to add that third one. I mean, it does open up more romantic possibilities, more profits, more harvesting different items for different cultures. I mean, it did force a lot of extra customization that I myself don't appreciate in that game. I liked it that they built this world that I got to explore rather than me having to build it. I mean, that's just me. I already do a lot of creative work. I don't need to do more creative work on top of my video game experience. So that's just my tiff with creative customization. It's nice that it's there, but I don't want it to be such a heavy focus when the game's literally about the world, the characters you explore. And I mean, of course, there's gonna have to be the conversation about how dry, how stale, what is the most like Kellogg generic adaptation ripoff that they did for Natsume's Harvest Moon compared to Marvelous Exceed's Story of Season, because since the creators and the localization company split a while ago, my own experience with once the game split and became 2 separate games that you had to call by 2 different titles, when Natsume presented Light of Hope, all I could see was a cash grab iPhone, Android, Linux game that was not meant to be ported to console or PC. It just looked shoddy altogether that they were using string bean looking Wii characters and that they forcibly brought out DLC after DLC in order to bring romanceable characters and other items into the game. I mean, sadly, Story of Season as well joined in on this bandwagon with Pioneers of Olive Town, which just really sullied my experience of the game now. Like, I have not even finished Pioneers of Olive Town, but I have not even finished the Trio of Towns Story of Season game, but that's just because you have to do a lot of extra side quests just to get a freaking barn. My god. But again, each game, they want to play around with different mechanics. They want to test the boundaries. But it's frustrating that the new entries push for, 1, a whole lot of tutorials. 2, they want to appeal to just kids instead of someone who's of a teenage or adult year who might appreciate problem-solving people's things in towns. Like, go back to a game like Save the Homeland, or introduce different customizations or mechanics. Open up the world again. My god, where are the forests in this game? Besides just to chop down trees. But that's all I'll talk about that, because that's a whole thing about gameplay and companies with their focus groups and what they think is going to actually appeal to a wide market. Because then you have Rune Factory, which is another Harvest Moon-esque game, adventure, dungeon crawling, fighting, but you get to do farming and romancing and best friending people too. And they haven't exactly done it in the same fashion as the Harvest Moon Story Season's done. Yes, they have done a DLC, but they gave it a nice extension to what already the game's built. Alright, but to circle back to the actual topic on hand, because besides gameplay, money, and all this stuff, we're here for the romance, the love, the heart palpitations, the titillating, titillating cutscenes, the animations, the CGs, the voice acting that happens. I mean, not in this specific series, but like Rune Factory has voice acting. That was like, what? Really? I really wish Harvest Moon even added little sounds like, ha ha ha. Just like little things like that. That would have added depth to these characters and you could kind of give them canon voices too. Hey. But Harvest Moon, Story of Seasons, Rune Factory, a plethora of games that give you options to romance, befriend, side quest, adventure, and to just see these different characters go about their daily lives. Whether it's Anne, the innkeeper's daughter, who's a bit tomboyish, but the potential of wooing Cliff on the side and seeing them develop into a romantic interest, or pursuing her yourself and discovering that charm of those overalls and the braided redhead, or going after Kai and always having to have that sorrowful bittersweet moment when summer ends and you've yet to give him enough pineapples to woo his heart to stay in the small farm across the town, or giving the chance at loving the tsundere Chase and his baking abilities and not having him fall for Maya and her very adorably sweet cuteness that can't even cook for worth a damn. Just like a little snippet, but this era of Harvest Moon Story of Season games allowed you day-to-day activities that you could stumble upon, seeing more of their character, fleshing out their backstory, presenting their personality traits, or even just understanding there's more that meets the eye than what you first expected, such as a great deal of people when Gray was suddenly changed from Potpourri's love interest to Kai's love interest surprised a lot of people given their personality differences, and especially adding in from Rick's hatred of Kai and Duke as well? Some people just don't like that free spirit nomad lifestyle. But again, they're from a small town, kind of nestled in the forest mountain area, so different perspectives. But anyways, past games had changed up different little tidbits, such as Gray used to be romanceable to Potpourri, which it makes sense location-wise why they would end up talking. But personality-wise, it doesn't really float the boat. But it's very cute color-wise, like the color scheme. I like it. Romance in these games before allowed you kind of time-based, or just a matter of triggering different locations where your romantic interests will end up falling in love with someone else, which now in the most recent games, they've entirely ripped away the possibility of even these characters having a life outside of being with the main protagonist. Because, I mean, at least in Grand Bazaar, you did get to see some events, but they never pursued marriage. Which could be good, because then they could just be like, okay, platonic friendships that are just developing, and you get to see more backstory. But it does make the rest of their lives a little hollow if they did want to have love, because now they're forever locked in to being alone. So, a little awkward. But again, how someone plays the game is going to be different, and how companies decided to do away with these, both coding and cutscene design, because now they can scrap all of that text and dialogue and just focus on pouring it into main protagonist gameplay, which kind of got a little stale. I mean, now in the most recent Story of Seasons, it doesn't feel like these characters interact with these other NPCs. It's kind of, they were one-track or focus once you start giving them gifts and love? Who knows, maybe in due time they will release another game that brings that back? Because I mean, like Rune Factory, number 5, they've added the option of you being able to romance anybody, so more flexibility. Though it doesn't sound like they have an option for the other characters to marry each other, so there's no children that will come through for a second generation, so that's a little sad. But this is getting a little underwinded, whatever the phrase of English that is, but Harvest Moon, Story of Seasons, Rune Factory have been a big part of my gaming adventure in both action, dialogue, and even just simple, cozy kind of game, farming. And they still bring joy to me because I've grown up with such a love for, quite literally, how Tim Rogers talks about on YouTube, especially through his 6-hour video about Tokimeki, of talking to these creatures. Because that in itself, just being able to interact with the fiction on a daily, simple level compared to a boss battle fight of life or death, where this, you can just ask about how their day went or if there's family troubles. It stimulates the brain in such a wonderful way. But we can segue that back into more of the Tokimeki, the visual novels, the other dating type games, because Harvest Moon is not just a romantic game. It is a both capitalistic and entrepreneur and step away from city life game, such as Stardew Valley, which takes roots from that game, but it takes roots from its own style of play, because the romance is bare bones until you add mods to it, especially if you've ever played the Yandere mods. Ooh, they add just to say it again, a titillating experience of fear and drama, because it adds dialogue to everyone involved. Especially if you play Elliot. Oh my goodness. Which is surprising, because we all assumed Sebastian would be the better Yandere, but nope. Elliot over there is writing a freaking play drama of the epics of Phantom of the Opera. But anyways, I've liked playing Stardew Valley but I don't like how many quests I have to do in order to just get stuff done, like freaking sprinklers. Good gosh, that alone took me so long to figure out. But that's because I was playing on keyboard and I am bad at it. I'd rather play with a controller just so my brain can think. But I don't have much else to talk about Stardew because, again, since the romance is bare bones until you add mods, the bare minimum of the game is enjoyable, but I don't see a lot of replay value in it, just because it's not going to scratch the itch that I have compared to Harvest Moon, where I feel like I can dive back in repeatedly. Like, literally, I'm playing Rune Factory 4 for the 4th run now of the main story plot, because now I'm actually pursuing Doug, because you can't even romance him until after you beat the final part of the game. Then you can actually raise up his love. So, having a hella fun time, doing all the crafts and all that, and I'm already at a level 125, and I've not even beat the final game set with when you're talking to the Wind Dragon. Because again, I'm not gonna spoil, so just to allude to that. But yeah, those are the games I've played in my childhood, my past, the ones that hold a deep hope or happiness, but obviously they're not the most logical or modern games to play. I mean, for one, in both Harvest Moon, Story of Season, and Rune Factory, they literally allow your pregnant character to go adventuring and save the world, or even farm for like 10 hours and no consequences. So it gives you an unrealistic reality of what your body's toll would have. But it is kind of cute that in Harvest Moon, Story of Season, your romantic partner in Tree of Tranquility and Animal Parade could give you fancy lunches depending on how they felt about you, because you have to continue to keep their heart levels up in marriage. A nice little touch to make you realize the effort still needs to be put in to date your partner. It wasn't super heavy emphasis, but still, it was something you would do daily or weekly to keep up with, like, hey, my character, I love you, moi moi. Obviously, other games probably delve into after marriage a bit more. Because, I mean, the fact of, in Harvest Moon, Story of Season, you can't get divorced. There's no possibility of your character having themselves become a widow all of a sudden, which would be freaking crazy for a game to actually implement, like an actual event where someone could actually die and you could get remarried or have to deal with your child meeting a new romantic interest. Oh my god, that in itself would be fascinating to actually have developed, because then you could actually have a real life conversation and use that as a building tool for real life stuff that could happen. My god, I need to investigate that, because this thought just epiphanied onto me just now. Ooh. Okay. Keep that thought. Let me write it down. Twiddly-dee. But obviously, these are big games that are well plus 50 hours that you can dump in just to build and explore and make your farm or create your character or battle monsters. But then there is smaller games that have a full developed story that once you finish, it's like 10, maybe 15 hours of gameplay. As in Lucky Rabbit Reflex. That is a very good example of what I would like to delve into. Alright. Lucky Rabbit Reflex, which, oh my god,
It came out in 2011. It came out before I finished high school. Oh my gosh. But man, this game has... what is it? 6 romantical... English. Romanceable 6 routes you could pursue, because there's even a secret character route, that you can only find out if you explore the town a bit more and catch the eye of some single foreigner. Ooh la la. And honestly, I loved his route, so I definitely have played it more than once. Because even his design just was eye-catching. And even his personality, it was nice that it developed from just retail customer service action to suddenly breaking out of the NPC role and having a personality. You're like, oh my gosh, hi. See, this is me actually having this realization of, oh, when you actually talk to someone outside of their job, it's a whole new perspective of how they act. Oh my gosh. Anyways, the game, it's your final year of high school or sixth form, because it's played somewhere in a British school. I don't know which part of England it's supposed to be based on, but it's your final year of high school. You're about to do your end of term exams, figure out who's your friends, if you're going to have that heartthrob relationship that may turn into a high school sweetheart, which really is not the best way to apply your rest of your history on. I mean, sure, you could develop with each other, but that's not the person you're going to be in 10 years. You're going to change and grow up and develop, and things are going to happen, so... which would be kind of cool for the creator to come back? Because what is it now? It's been 10 years since this game's come out. My god, if I could just talk to the creator and say, hey, what would these characters now be doing 10 years later? And especially if they could have an after story. Oh, the deliciousness that could happen. Can I just keep that in mind? Because that'd be fun, lore-wise, to see. Because once the game ends, you forget, in reality, this relationship would proceed on depending on what stats you ended on. Oh. But anyways, my mania. Anyways, it starts. It's your final year of school. You're obviously a new transfer, which already is an awkward time. But the game, besides giving you the option of 6 romanceable bachelors to pursue from, you can develop friendships with other sweet ladies of your school. And they all have good personalities. They're not bitches like other games where they try to make the side chicks or the ladies of the game enemies. This one, they actually make them sweet to hang out with and have their flaws. And they have such good designs as well. It's appreciated when a game doesn't make bitches. Like, just to emphasize that, and that you can actually have platonic friendships. Of course, it would be nice if you could develop it as a GG game that you could potentially romance them, but it didn't get fully fleshed out to that, so you can read between the lines maybe, but still, it is appreciated that you have an option to forego romantic relationships and pursue your friends and have a good last semester botching up crepes and pancake orders at the end. A game where you can romance. You have a sim-based management, and you don't have to go super in-depth on personality plots or drama or battling, and you can have a light-hearted adventure in wooing someone and enjoy your school days, making good grades or hanging out, playing arcade, earning some money, and even seeing how the game spends your time compared to maybe your own life, or getting to see the perspective of someone else in a British school. It's a delightful game, honestly. Like, it's available on Steam for $10, so hey yo, it's a fun game. You can crank it out. Oh, so it is 5 possible best friends and 5 possible eligible bachelors plus secret ending too. And not only do you have now 10 possible endings, there is some variations to get a few more possible endings as well, so give it a shot. This does sound like I'm promoting it, but I loved the game. It was so much fun. Just to emphasize some of the games that hold a good memory to without having to be super complex or having maybe enriching or new styles, but simply being a good solid game that has an overall cast that gives you a pleasant time to play and explore. And with that, we can delve into a game company that has love and hate, where they did make quite a bit of games that have either bisexual, straight, or Yuri or lesbian type love, and having dating sims as well in it, plus being a visual novel and romanceable as well. Winter Wolves, which some people may know them from The Flower Shop, Vera Blanca, Spirited Hearts, Bionic Hearts, Always Remember Me, Helena, Nicole, Roommates, right, there was that one too. More recently, there was C14 Dating, Amber's Magic Shop, Love Bites, Strong Planet Stronghold, Love Notes. I think that was another one. I totally don't know what that one's about. I think that was everything that was on the most recognizable list for that company. Now, some people absolutely love this because, for one, they really tried to make games that were both for straight, for lesbian, for bisexual, for non-traditional heterosexual relationships, which was appreciated that you could experiment with the sexuality of these characters a bit more than just the standard. And they did try to branch out a few of their titles to have one version and then create it to a new copy. But a lot of people didn't appreciate how heavy the stat simulation is, especially for when Nicole came out, being murder mystery thriller and being a college setting. Some people were like, oh, thrilling, we're starting off freshman year having to solve some strange disappearance as they're romancing potential bad guys. Now, the game does pull so much of your time of doing college, of managing your time, and then exploring. But then all the dialogue, all the actual plot felt very small compared to the day-to-day task, which is why a lot of people do talk about how college is hard to implement in a game setting because college for some are very regimented or a freeing experience. And with this, it does make it feel very stressful because now you have to worry about your time and energy to stay on top of your grades, but now all this other stuff you gotta deal with in the game, plus the very, very unbelievable magical thing that we're able to afford school on a small job. just to be real here. have to give it, some of the games Winter Wolves has come out with hold a bit too much of numbers. The mathematical part, not the thrilling part. Because when they produced Never Forget Me and Always Remember Me, there was a lot of stats you had to meet to even get a good ending. Which, I mean, if you're just playing the game for the first time, it's frustrating you'll have to pull out a walkthrough just to figure out the math alone. But then, on the flip side, sure, Winter Wolves has a particular set of games it's been producing, and it's not everyone's style. But a game that's closely associated or even promoted in the same fields or circles, Hanako games. That's the one that I'm thinking of because Cute Bite, Magical Diary, England Exchange, Black Closets, A Little Lily Princess, Long Live the Queen, Date Warp. Ooh, we gotta talk about Date Warp. Man, that was a surprise of a game. Because for one, Leech Street Boys producing the opening song freaking stuck in my head for so many years, that song. It was fantastic for me. 5 days ago, Janet left her dorm to go on a date. She never returned. Was she kidnapped? Murdered? Did she run away? Will she ever be seen again? The choices you make can change her fate and help her find romance or destruction in one of the 11 surprising endings in Date Warp. Now, this was set up different than the standard romantic otome dating sim game because for one, the game doesn't actually leave you with romantic endings, rather you living and realizing you've been a part of a strange time pocket or time warp in a way. Yes, you do get to delve into kind of flirting or romantic or caring and compassionate conversation, but with each character, they all have their own individual goals at the end of the day. They're not interested in romance and love at any time besides feeling like they've bonded with Janet, the main character. And depending on how you read the story, yes, it can feel like you've won or wooed their heart. But the main objective is Janet left her dorm and disappeared. And this game follows the events of why that seems to have happened. And it has some fun puzzle mechanics, the different characters, the different endings you end up in, which are not all good endings for you or the other players. I think the main appeal of this game is it didn't force romance in one night. That's appreciated, that it just dipped your toes into meeting and bonding with someone else. It didn't shove it in your face like, love them now. I think that's all we need to discuss on Winter Wolves and Hanako games, because the rest are give it a try and see if you prefer that type of game. Now, we can go to Sake Visual, which in recent years has become much more known in the otome visual novel gaming scene because it first started out with recognition by Ripples, which had pretty much their mascot character, but it develops into such a slice of life, sweet story that's appreciated. Besides just a character that stands out from the crowd, gives you those warm, fuzzy feelings to have. And from there, they have Alistar? Yeah, pretty much the perfect slice of life, dating, sim management, gamer boyfriend game you could have with very attractive CGs in it. Now, the game is very short for the premise of the story. You're just trying to find out who stole your in-game loot, your bounty, your booty. And with the 3 different choices you have some different variations you can form because of the initial impression you're having of these characters to when you open your eyes to love for them. And I loved it. It was such a sweet little entry for this game company to bring to the table. Because a game that's not in their romantic interest is the... What is it? Oh, balls to the wall. What is it? Mystery games. Jisei, Kansei, Yosei. Murder, mystery, supernatural, voiced as well, visual novels. They have been such a great game to indulge in a big story-building episodic story that gives you the tools to become your own detective in the game. It's not a romantic game, but it's just a nice side note to tell about this game because there's 3, and it's just increased in quality and become better with each episode they've released. It's a good game. Definitely, if you have time, check out the mystery visual novels by Sake Visual, starting with Jisei, then Kansei, and then Yosei. Excellent games. Now, their most highly established game of the company, Backstage Pass, which I've not pursued all the characters in the game, but a very nice plus in this game, it actually had a root with someone who's asexual. And they didn't joke about it, they were very serious on the topic, and it just felt like you still were able to have a romantic relationship with them without feeling like it was forced or if it's just a niche. So it felt just genuine to have this character in the story. Plus, they have a full-fledged route that you have to find technically, because it is technically a secret, but still. The character's voiced, they have a pretty sprite. I would assume you could pursue them. But Backstage Pass is their bigger game that has a full semester of your college experience. It's voiced, it has stat raising, you have multiple different characters that are in the entertainment business, and your own character has a makeup profession, but she has a personality that talks about how people are concerned, anxious, finding themselves and building up their own identity in college. Like this is one of the games that I feel genuinely take the approach correctly and give you a believable story that gives you some hecticness but fun to play over and over. Like, just because I'm a big fan of Sake Visual, I'm still not being biased on this. Like, they did a really good job compared to some of the other titles that have tried to do this. It genuinely feels they're on the right, correct path that gives you a wonderful adventure in coming into your own. Now, we've been talking about all these different games and the different times, and just to think about it, how have these dating games, these romances, these tomes, these stat simulators, sim management games bled into my own life, affected me? And for that, maybe Harvest Moon gave me too much of a hope that, for one, people would be straight up with their secrets, that in due time of developing feelings, that people would spill their guts, that they wouldn't play around this silly game where they would hide things for years to come. Or the fact of, in Kurayama no Hate de Kimi o Mas, that
love could be bonded super quickly and that you'll know who is truly on your side, even though it is life or death. I mean, in many cases, these games present romances that demand that you persist and pester and potentially push boundaries rather than make healthy communication. But some of these games have been good about bringing to light some context, consent, the age of old games, maybe even making parodies and teasing at old games that like to give you options of snooping or asking around or eavesdropping rather than just straight up confronting the problem. But in all the time I've played these games, in all the time I've interacted with the content, the biggest thing is finding out the truth to the game, finding out why a character is acting a certain way and if their qualities are redeemable in that situation. Of course, I mean, just recently I was playing Hooked on You for Dead by Daylight, and from the very start, I did not care for Trapper, which he is kind of acts like an overly buff rich guy, but really his personality does not rub me in any way good. But then you have characters like Huntress, Spirit, and Wraith where they present flaws in ways that feel genuine and that I still want to learn more about them. Maybe it's in that fact that I don't want to pursue a person who thinks they have all their stuff together. I mean, Mystic Messenger, Jumin, the CEO lonesome cat guy, he still has flaws. Even though he's successful and he has his life together, he still presents issues, and that feels genuine when you play a game to romance someone. It doesn't feel cheap, it feels like you're learning more about that person rather than just their perfect form. And of course, people who are more of the fan of Zen, he still presented little flaws by how much he put himself on a pedestal, but as you talk to all the other characters, you learned about his other flaws, his other traits. So still, even though he's presented as the playboy or the egotistical one, just like Jumin, he's presented with flaws that can make him more personable. I mean, hell, in the very start of the game of Mystic Messenger, V was not even a pursuable character and was presented as already in love with someone else. So, I mean, even with due time, people realized the characteristics that they could see in this character, they wanted to have it. They were hell-bent on getting this character a pursuable route, which thank goodness he does, because really, he needed some genuine love. I mean, yeah, we should talk about Mystic Messenger in depth, but that's a good little tidbit to put in there. But anyways, how dating games? I mean, the whole concept, I know there's plenty of articles that have come out, plenty of parodies about the whole concept of you constantly give a gift to someone each day and their love grows. Because it does make romantic interactions seem transactional, it makes it seem strange and creepy, almost in the fact of there's comics that talk about how you could technically never talk to the characters in-game, but just give them gifts, and you could just see their events and grow their heart technically, even though that doesn't work in reality. You have to communicate with your partner in some shape, way, or form. So, I mean, that didn't affect me in real life, because obviously it was a way the system could allow you to romance without having to sit there for 1 year in real life pursuing the character. So giving gifts was a task you could do
that both tested if you knew what they liked and if you could acquire those items. But, like when you have visual novels where it gives you only 3 different choices to pick from, that's not reality. Reality, you would be able to type in your answers and see how that goes. So, depending on how impressionable you are when you start these games, some of the myths, some of the stereotypes, or how they present seduction, romance, wooing, you might get an odd sense of how courtship happens. When you look at Tokimeki, you can't just raise your parameters to a stat and expect to fall in love. You have to date them as well. You have to get to know them, see if you're compatible with each other. Because besides gaining affection over a certain amount of dates, you have to be able to go to the aquarium and both like each other's answers to whatever you talk about. And you don't ever have to give them Valentine's Day chocolate. It's just a nice, helpful boost to get your love up a little bit faster. So it gives you some leeway between what can be done and what is just nice little perks along the way. Just in reality, receiving presents from your significant other is a nice thought, but it's not required in order to have a happy life, depending on your love language and what is set out as boundaries, because everyone's different. Ooh, I've even just realized age gaps and how dating sims can both play into that or toe the line. Both in the sense of how they present characters for someone to find appealing or to find so unappealing. But then the fact of some games refuse to age up or age down people depending on the situation. It's a little frustrating when game after game you may be presented with a series that you know is going to have XYZ in it, and then they suddenly throw in another Y into it, and you go, huh? That's odd, but I guess for some reason maybe they're experimenting or they're testing to see if people like that certain character. Like, here, perfect example would be Tokimeki. It has a variety of ages that are presented to you. Yes, they have backed away from the extreme ages, i.e., if you've played Tokimeki Girl Side First Love, plus or not plus, depending if you had it before or after the second game was ported through. But essentially you had the option of romancing your principal of the literal high school that you were going to graduate in 4 years. Yeah, and the dude could drive you home and take you on dates. It's some people really, really, really like the dude, and some people really, really don't. It goes on the duality of both. This is a fictional man that has no actual hold in reality, but then it's a fictional story that if someone impressionable was playing this game may develop a liking for this, when in reality, no, bad. And, even his characteristics that you want for the parameters does make it seem even more odd to go out with him. But again, it's on even the battle of fiction and reality at the same time, besides the game presenting you with a romantic interest that is, 20 or 30 years older than you? Because the reality of it, the character is mid 15 to 18 when the game is playing, and then leaving high school. I think there's still a 25-year difference, I believe. I have no idea. And besides that,
every one of the main entries on the girls' side games that I know of have a teacher potential route you can pursue. It's only more recently they made it that it was not an active dating route when they brought out Fourth Heart. No, not Fourth Heart, sorry, lied. When they brought out Third Love Third Story. I see, I'm getting all the titles mixed up. But anyways, they presented the non-typical teacher character, which looks like a Kohai. It looks like Shoto. It looks like young kid. And he's apparently a youthful 24-year-old teacher who's very gung-ho and karate and all this, but the only way to enter into his route is to suffer your grades and then play the rest of the game with the hopes of becoming just the best high school experience you have ever had, and then confess to him. Like, in this entire time, you two have never actually had day-to-day bonding sessions of this love that's growing inside of our character. So in a way, it is one-sided affection that kind of gives way to a crush, but it doesn't allow them to date in the game, which is interesting, because then we had Second Kiss, we had First Love Plus, and yeah, those ones where you were able to literally go on dates. I mean, yes, you had to wait for them to ask you. You couldn't call them. That was one limitation it did have. It gave them all the power, and you could never schedule time, and you had to just hope they asked you. Again, another thing, power dynamics. Let's see. I mean, obviously, besides teacher, principal, there were... Let's see. Because in the third story, they do have it where you could pursue an author who's entirely not even affiliated with the school, who you just randomly meet. Which, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's like an anime. It's like a shoujo manga premise that you stumble into each other with the knowledge of this person's work in hand, and you see him from afar needing to clean up, and you're like, I can fix him, and he cleans up, and then you're like, wow. Like, seriously, it's that kind of plot. Because then on the flip side, they literally have a character who looks like he's just entered high school that you can pursue, who's trying to be the best baseball player, who is just this puppy dog looking kid. So the duality of much older and much younger presenting characters you can date or woo or have the potential of confessing to them at the end. I mean, they do have Masaki from second season, but he's a college student, so then the age gap is not as big. But still, you're in two different sections of your life currently. You're not at the same pace or the same ambitions. But some of the, the backstory, the information you learn about Masaki presents him to be kind of an old soul in a way. So he doesn't act too kiddish, but he still has responsibility about himself. I mean, he has a job. Who else were there? I mean, the game definitely likes to play with height differences. Some shorter, some super tall, and some that are right at your eye level, which is a nice range of heights that they make it believable. I mean, other than that, no, there's no other really bizarre characters in the series you go after that are out of range. But since this is fiction and it is a game that now has been made a few years back, times have changed of what is
appropriate or acceptable or what people are willing to play. Because again, you might have some people who will never tell you they've played Tokimeki because they don't want to be judged for playing a game where you could pursue someone super old or super young looking. But again, there's some other games out there that have much scarier age gaps. Like, bizarre. Okay, but rambling on age gaps, romantic games. I mean, I never had a real life desire to be with someone much older than me. Like, legit, there's appeal in fiction for it because, for one, they weren't real, so they had unrealistic faces, health, and opinions about the world. I mean, really, the reality is, if you met a real life older person, you may have some really conflicting ideas or even frustration at their maybe stubbornness or lack of change to new things, or that you realize they're going at a slower pace, or they've done their risk and they are now content with what they're doing. That's the thing. It's not like fiction where you're gonna have One Piece characters who look like old men but they can fight like they're a god. The flip-flop of fiction to reality, okay? Let's see, I mean, other than that, I mean, how the ways about consent and the towing the line kind of stuff that some of these games do, ooh, like Period Cube. I was really excited about Period Cube. I was pumped for a game that was going to pull you inside the video game itself, that you got to do sword art online, dot hack. But in this case, they literally decided to make the protagonist oblivious to video games, so we had to be forced to listen to the most basic video game topics and terminology and lingo like they're 5 years old. That they could have simply have given us a protagonist who actually played the video game. Like, why did we have to have the shy, meek, oblivious girl go into the game? I just don't understand that was the logic in going into this. But that was their decision. So with Period Cube, I mean, it has quite the thing for hands in the game. Like, honestly, there's a lot of freaking dialogue in multiple different characters' roots where they just admire the soft, dainty little hands of hers, like almost like it was gonna be consumed, okay? But that's just what the writer was feeling like doing that day. I mean, it really pushes uncomfortableness of, what is it? Forcing characters to spend close proximity. Right. With the really small, random bad guy route that you're able to play in the game, which you have to kind of work hard to even enter into it. It made you just feel like you're in terror every second because you can't just be free. You're like almost chained to them. That is just frustrating. The games that, like, what is it, Black Wolf Saga? Oh my god, the freaking Diabolica lovers, the freaking vampires, and the Wizard of Oz Mafia one that they did. They, again, just don't understand about boundaries. They literally will say no and still bad stuff will happen. I thankfully have a very good idea of boundaries in reality, because then I can just complain for 5 hours how these games of romantic content will still give you such breakdowns of boundaries and just basic respect because they want your character to feel like they need a white knight to save them, and it's frustrating. Because especially because these are big name games being written as if you can't just have a nice, friendly time without your boundaries being shorn about every single second. Yes, we could continue rambling about, but that is entirely separate of a content on this game. Oy, oy, oy. What else? What else could reflect back from dating and reality? I personally myself, audio, ASMR, the voice acting, and the matter of how things are spoken do hold a much more significant impact on me compared to maybe the charming smile. Of course, in the way of how I select a dating game, if I will even give it a try, I know I look for more small-based game producers, the development blog that I can actually see the work that's been put in rather than just go to a big box website and buy a game just because the pretty cover. That doesn't do any justice because you can miss out on some very epic games that maybe just don't have good social media presence or their art lacks a bit. But if the story itself, the music, the sound of it holds together a strong emphasis, I will definitely play it. That is one thing that has been developed over time. Because again, trying to make art for a video game is very complicated because for the very fact if you have to do different outfits, different customization, different lighting, the sprites, different outfits, motion, different triggering events. I can sympathize with someone having basic art as long as everything else is polished up. Because again, the art is only there to help guide your imagination to fill in the pieces. To sum it up, my impressions of love and romance have been given some good advice, some strange advice, some outlandish things that reality would never approve of, and some wild hopes that could be role played out, but not really going to happen in reality. Like, let's face it, not everyone's dreaming, okay? Alright? Now, I have been given a way to look at myself as a romanceable person, a loving person, but even a person who can go off on adventures on the same time and have my own thoughts and feelings, and that there is ways to go about doing your own business and having time for relationships. Rune Factory, you're able to go on this epic journey in these games, and depending on which one you play, you're either locked out of romancing until you beat the first half of the game, or you're presented with a limited set of characters you can woo, given the context of their life and story. And the game did present one time in Rune Factory Frontier the option of pursuing Eunice, the happy innkeeper's daughter, who was given a controversial choice between the game during kind of like the crush stage of pursuing the characters, where she could decide to lose weight, because when she starts off the game, she's not one of the just slender, thin, small, tiny girls. She's presented as a maybe warm, kind, and gentle character where you don't describe her
physical appearance, but she still does look adorable. I mean, not gonna lie, she has her mother's eyes, her father's face, so it's a medley between adorable but still attractive. Now, because in the game of Frontier, yeah, just to make sure I'm talking about the right game, there gives the option where you, the player, who's actively already pursuing this character, to tell her that, hey, you can do this diet, or no, continue being yourself, that your only choice here literally forces her hand, that she will either keep with the diet and not change her mind, or she will not take on the diet. I mean, it's just frustrating for the fact of our vote hinges what her appearance is going to be. I mean, it's not like a small change. I mean, quite literally, they have 2 different sets of sprites for her characters before and after the diet option comes up. And frankly, it's just annoying that only for the bigger girl do they even give that kind of option. You don't have the option to tell any of the other characters to dye their hair, cut it, change their fashion, change how they talk. Only with Eunice did the game actually think, we need to make sure people actually pick her, so let's give people an option. Which, I mean, we could talk about Honey Pop too, because, I mean, technically that's a dating sim with a similar kind of problem where they had a toggle switch for how they present. But we'll get to that in a bit. But still on Rune Factory, everything else in the romance was cute. I mean, they had literally the character Selphie, who works in the library, and the only way to really actually raise her love level, her love interest with you, is reading the books in the library. That sharing her interests actually develops her heart more compared to giving her gifts or talking to her. But sitting there and reading through books builds it up over time. I mean, heck, when you pursue Bianca, you can't give her gifts. They don't do anything for her. You literally can just see her and interact with her on a daily basis, which does take a lot longer compared to everyone else. So you have to be dedicated to see her ending. Especially kind of hard because then you have to walk past Tabitha. Ugh, what a beautiful maid. Which I appreciated that in that regard, Rune Factory Frontier gave you different ways to level up your hearts rather than just giving gifts. Which, what was it? The one who runs the hot spring with the pink hair and wears the mage outfit that's all in red. You can go to the hot springs and now level up her hearts as well. Oh yeah, plus, after you're done with the diet option, if you pick that, Eunice's favorite gifts alter and change. So that is another inconvenience. Sure, if you're not good at crafting and cooking, it gives you a bit of leeway, but if you had been already working so hard on her other favorite objects, to suddenly have to change that is frustrating, especially if you didn't realize your choice actually impacted the game. Which would have been actually a smart thing for the game to have let us know before having that choice come up. But hey, what's done is done. Well, at least it's not as crazy as that Android app that was voice acted for some popular anime boy where you would lose weight with them. But the whole premise was body shaming and making you play as a character in the game to weight loss. Oh yeah, I think it was Burn Your Fat With Me. Technically a dating sim, but more so a workout app that was disguised as a dating sim, which really was just a lot of shaming going on. Ay. But yeah, back to Honey Pop, because the whole thing of it is technically a dating game. Yes, it is
more so on casual hookup culture than long-term romantic interests, depending on how you go about the lore. Now, if you're someone who's ever been into the game, the pickup artist, the casual dater scene, this game may present you with a way that could reflect your own dating habits. I mean, for the very fact, the game Honey Pop is meant to score yourself a night with said girl after buying her gifts, taking her out on nice dates, remembering tidbits about her. But I mean, that's it. Once you go to that third date, there's really nothing else to gain, technically, like, to put it in a transactional term, besides extra money and honey points in order to level up your skills. But still, the game breaks it down in such a way that you just run through each girl, have a good time, and then that's it. You don't revisit her, you don't have awkward encounters about having casual fun times with said girl and then said girl's mother in the next second. I mean, the game talks about that in the second one a little bit, but they still throw it to the wind. So, mind you, the game is crude, and it's not there for romantic heart-filled moments. So, bear in mind, it is definitely a player game. It's fun to play. It's exciting to actually see the lore in the background, especially if you talk about Audrey, which some people love and hate her, but she did get another appearance in the background after the first game, which, if you have time to, definitely check it out. It's interesting to see the type of character they decided to mold her into later on. But that's only for people who want to play Honey Pop, because it's a match 3 game. It's not really a visual novel. It's pretty much point and click, have a good time. It does have some good catchy music though, so if you're into it, you're into it. But there's not really much you can say about relationships on that, besides, in the reality of it, never talks about having safe sex. It doesn't really go into anything else besides point A to point B to point C to victory. Can't really... I mean, sure, you could dive into it if you really wanted to analyze it, but from just a basic point of view of it having an impression on dating, it's not that deep compared to something like White Album or Clannad or Saya no Yuta or the House of Fata Morgana. I mean, these are different games that deal with love and relationships and bonding in a much more complicated and complex way. But still, they have their points. They have their different audiences, their different appeals. So, at that, I mean, I've played them, so the wide variety of entertainment and interests you'll gain from it. I think lastly, the game I want to talk about is Mystic Messenger, given it is an otome game, but it's a gacha Android iPhone phone game as well, so it's not set up in the same way as a console game that you pick up on your DS, your PlayStation, your Wii, your PS4, whatever else it is. This one, quite literally from a company that made, I believe, Nameless, the one you must remember, that was set up in a standard computer-based game you could play. And then suddenly, in, 2016 to 2018 really, they brought up Mystic Messenger, which gained notoriety because most of the texts or in-game events they set up in a real-life time zone, so you would essentially get text messages from the romantic interests. So it gave you the same length of a story, but in bite-sized pieces you could pick up and go as you went about your day. And the messages pop up at a variety of different times, so you didn't feel rushed to get it in the morning. And it was a cute way the game made you feel like this AI character was communicating with you, which was an interesting way to go about it since our phones are being used most days. Though it had a great success, but then they brought out just recently the Sum game, which has had a bit of a struggle to live up to the Mystic Messenger title. Now, it has quite a few days worth of content in it, but there's a subscription service you have to use for that, which both ways you get no ads, but for every month of playing the game, you have to pay about $20 to $23 every month for the subscription to do a whole lot of things that should automatically be included in the game, or gone about it the same way Mystic Messenger had it, where it had the hourglass that you could acquire freely and then convert into the in-game money. I don't understand why they decided to go away from that, knowing that the game is kind of pushed to a younger audience, given that it's a phone-based game. So you're gonna have high schoolers, middle schoolers pick this game up, knowing that they can't pay for the in-game subscription without an adult. So kind of scummy on that part. Sure, it's still free to play, but they make it much more challenging to complete in that fashion. Still, it's not the first dating otome gacha Android phone to go about this, because what is the Arcana, which did get into a lot of trouble in the past for paywall blocking a lot of episodes for people to play the game without spending over $1,000 in grand total. And the creators didn't really respond back in a sane and logical way, so this is why I've just stayed away from the entire gacha phone app games, because I just feel like it just pushes too much of the in-game purchases. I mean, heck, I picked up the Obey Me game because at first, the little chibis, the little story, how it's set up, designed to be on your phone, looked exciting, and the in-game characters talk to you and chat with you, but still, it pushes for a lot of in-game purchases for little doodads and little voice things, and I'm just not in it for that. I'd rather buy the game and have it, not all this extra stuff that's gonna pop up every 2 seconds of like, ooh, buy this, buy that. I'm like, no. It just irritates my experience with the entire game. That's why Mystic Messenger was the last one, and probably will stay the only phone-type romance game I would play freely and happily. But, this is quite, oh god, I mean, for the amount of games of romance we could still talk about, like, fuck, there's the entire section of goofy parody, just making fun of the entire genre. I mean, we have Raptor Boyfriend in both the mystical small town creatures one, where you could literally date a raptor, or the T-Rex one, the freaking Pigeon Boyfriend series, Dream Daddy, Monster Prom, I Love You Colonel Sanders. We have oodles of other little just gimmicky games that still made quite a bit of sensation when they released, because people got a kick from the story and it was something different than the norm. mean, that could go into just like parodied games at entirely a separate video. I think we can wrap up today's discussion on love and dating in the digital realm. Because if we're gonna continue this, we might be stuck for another 5 hours chatting away. But definitely an XP day to reminisce on how love and romance and dating culture has been represented poorly or accurately in games. My own opinions of what have been maybe cultivated or appreciated through games. I mean, the fact of Rune Factory having non-traditional meters in order to raise up affection, such as you can only talk to Bianca, you can't give her gifts, you have to read books for Selphie, you have to go to the bathhouse to woo Melody, how some games will block romance until after you finish the plot, so you can't be distracted by it, or how Harvest Moon has changed over the years from having the game end when you get married, compared to now, the game can last 50 more years and you can get a romantic vacation home with your family. Sure, your children couldn't grow up, but now in more recent titles like Animal Parade, Tree of Tranquility, you would see your child develop into actually like a talking human being. And then games that have broken the mold, like Mystic Messenger, evolving into a phone-based romance game. And even the funny little games that have popped up here and there. I mean, there's an Otome if you want to play for Resident Evil 4, if you're feeling like having a little less stressful time learning about the game. But, yep, definitely the XP was gained when contemplation and the wonder of how games can push it or how they can make love into an actual device you can play in a game rather than just like in Tokimeki where you spend your time here and there and people will come to like you, but they'll come to love you if you start pursuing them actively rather than passively. There's more games to be discussed further down the line, but that requires me to play them a bit more so I understand the background, the information, and maybe even tidbits that are hiding within the game itself. So, let us go dream away and sleep and recover for a new battle, or maybe have a nice relaxing start to our next time we visit. It's been your host, SelphyClark. Have a good night, have a good day, farewell, and gain your XP for the next adventure. Goodbye.